What's up, guys? Thanks for tuning in. Today I'm going to show you how we're going to go about repacking the wheel bearings on our 2018 Grand Design 28BH. Not a difficult job to do yourself. It's recommended you do it once a year. We have put many miles on this fifth wheel. It's been close to 20,000 miles and I have not repacked the bearings yet. So definitely something I wanted to do before we took back off on the road again. So I'm going to go ahead and knock that out and show you that it's a fairly easy job to do yourself. It takes a little bit of time, a little bit of patience, but with just a few basic tools, you can do this job yourself, and it'll also give you a chance to get in there, check your brakes out, make sure everything's looking good there, clean everything up, adjust it if need be. So a lot of benefits to getting these wheel bearings done and doing it yourself. So also, while I've got the tire off, that's going to give us real easy access to our spring hangers. So I'm going to take our grease gun, I'm going to lube all the spring hangers. It's a little difficult. You got to get all the way underneath the fifth wheel to do it with the tires on. So, you know, while the tires are off, it gives you super easy access to all your grease fittings out of there. So you guys stay tuned. I'll show you how to knock this job out. All right, so all you're going to need to do this job really is your grease seals. I got these from O'Reilly Auto Parts. The O'Reilly number is the same part as the National Seal part number, which is a 412920. I actually got the wrong ones the first time I went up there. I looked up the Dexter 5,200 pound axles, and there was a seal number on there, so I went with that seal number, and as it turned out, that was not the right one. So once I pulled one of these off, I got the Dexter seal out, found a part number on it, and I cross-referenced it that way. So for the 2018 28BH anyway, with the 5,200 pound axles, 412920. But I'll leave a link in the description to a website that has a complete cross-reference listing for all of the Dexter seal numbers, and it's got other brands on there too that seal will cross-reference to. So if you're not sure what seal you need to get, then you can use that cross-reference chart to find what you need. So axle seals, bearing packer. You don't have to have a bearing packer. You can do it by hand. There's a lot of videos out there that will show you how to pack wheel bearings by hand. But if you use a bearing packer, number one, it keeps all your grease nice and contained, makes it relatively mess-free. I mean, dealing with packing bearings is always going to be a little bit messy, but this will keep your grease contained so that, you know, you're not just getting rid of that grease, throwing that grease away. You can hang on to this. It'll keep it sealed up. I'll probably store this where I store all my oil change supplies in our little box up there, so that I'll have this for a long time, and I can pack these wheel bearings anytime I need to. So show you how the wheel bearing packer works if you've never used one before. I've got it filled up with some red wheel bearing grease, high temp wheel bearing grease. You're gonna need a hammer, a couple flathead screwdrivers, small ones, and then a pair of channel locks. So that's really all you need. So I'm going to go ahead and get this tire taken off and show you guys what's behind here and what's involved in packing these wheel bearings. So I've got a piece of cardboard laid out here so that I can lay all my stuff down here on the cardboard so it doesn't get all in the gravel and get dirt in it. You want to try to keep your wheel bearings clean. Don't let them get in the dirt and you don't want dirt and everything getting up in those bearings. So try to keep them in a clean space when you're taking them apart. That way you can just put the new grease in there, pop them back in. Again, since it's pretty messy, I got a roll of shop towels as well. You can use paper towels, but you're going to go through like 2 rolls. Use paper towels. These things are pretty heavy duty, so get your roll of shop towels. It just makes it a lot easier. So I'm using my Craftsman electric impact gun. take this tire off. I picked this up actually when I was getting really frustrated that I couldn't get an appointment to get my tires rotated on the truck. I was getting real aggravated. Nobody had appointment times for days and days, and all I needed was just a simple tire rotation. So I went down and bought the electric impact gun. It was like $100, but I've rotated my tires twice. I've changed out tires on the fifth wheel as far as like rotating them around. So it's already paid for itself, and I've only had it since back in the summertime, and I love it. It's a great investment. All right, so get your tire off. So the first thing you're going to see is this bearing buddy. So what this actually allows you to do is, with your tire on and the center cap on, you can pop the middle out of your center cap using a screwdriver. Like this. And that gives you access to your bearing buddy there in the middle. And what that allows you to do, you can take this plug out, and that'll give you access to a grease fitting so that you can grease your bearings with a regular grease gun in between the time when you pack them. So in between bearing packing, you can do this. I try to do this on ours about every 3 months. Shoot a couple squirts of grease in there to keep everything lubed up. So that's what this is. That's what you're going to see when you take your tire off, take your wheel off. So set that aside. So now you got to take that off. And where you're going to do that, you're just going to get your hammer, get you a little flat screwdriver, and just come in there and just gently tap to get that starting to come loose. Now once you get a little gap back there, once you get a little gap in there, you can just kind of work it around. That's going to pop right off. So that's good to go. We'll just set that aside. So now you've got your retainer that keeps the spindle nut from backing off. So we're going to take this retainer off. Use a little smaller screwdriver this time, a little smaller flat screwdriver. And you're just going to pop that off. Now, when you take that retainer off, you're going to be able to see this axle nut, the spindle nut, is not very tight. It doesn't need to be super tight. Dexter recommends torquing this down to 50 foot-pounds of torque, and then backing off until it's loose, and then just tighten it down by hand as tight as you can get it. I've already done our rear tire, and the way I did ours is I tightened it down. I don't have a socket that'll fit this, so I don't know exactly where 50 foot-pounds of torque is, but I know if I crank down on those channel locks and get it tight, that's going to be at least 50 pounds of torque. And then I backed it off and then just snugged it back down just very, very gently to where my retainer would go back over it. So we'll show you that when we put it all back together, but that's pretty much the gist of how we did it. So I'll take that nut off, set it down here. So now to get that center bearing out, you're going to need to take a washer off. After you take the nut off, you're going to have a washer back there to take off. And getting you some decent nitrile gloves to work with will save you a lot of mess as well. Like I said, this stuff's kind of messy, but it's not difficult. It's just a little messy. So now you see we're down to our bearing. The way you're going to get that bearing out is I'm going to tap on the top of the drum, and that should pop that bearing loose, and it should come right out, just like that. And you can see this bearing. There is not a lot of grease left in there, so it is pretty. It is well in need of being repacked. So when you get your bearing out, you're going to look and you want to make sure there's no pitting on any of the bearings. Make sure there's no grooves or anything in it. Make sure your bearings look good. If they're pitted out or anything, you're going to need to get new bearings. But with a little bit of luck, everything should look good, and you'll just have to repack them and then be on your way. So now we got to get that rear bearing out. You can pull the drum all the way off and try to beat that seal out with a hammer and screwdriver, but there's an easier way. We're going to thread our nut back on. just going to slide our drum off. As soon as you slide the drum off, you're going to want to let it sit down on the spindle. So look through there, make sure that your bearing is up against the back of that nut. Hard to see, it's kind of dark in there. And all you're going to do is give it a nice little pop. Just like that. So now you've got your bearing out, you've got your grease seal out, all in one motion. So sometimes when it's real greasy, it'll slip off and you have to do it a couple of times, but that's what you're looking for. There's your back bearing. And again, we're going to wipe that all down, make sure it looks good. So we'll set it back inside the drum for right now. You know, you can see there's a lot of brake dust built up in here. There's a lot of brake dust built up around the edge of the drum. So we're going to spray all this down with some brake parts cleaner before we reassemble it and make sure that the brakes are all adjusted. That way we can take care of all this at one time while we're in here. So there's your original seal. And if you clean that off, you'll be able to see a Dexter part number on that seal. Wipe our nut back off. Take it off. Sand aside. Wipe that spindle off, get all that old gunky grease off of there. Grab our brake cleaner. There's no point in putting this all back together with a bunch of brake dust and mess in there. And I'll take our bearing out. We're going to wipe it all off. Alright, so now we're going to move over here to our bearing packer. So this has a couple pieces. This is just a cap for it. It's just a lid that goes on it. So we'll set him over the other way. Won't fall. So your bearing packer is going to have a couple of pieces. You're going to have the center piece that's going to push down on the bearing. So the way this works is you put your bearing in with the tapered side down. You set it right in there. And as you apply pressure, it forces the grease up through this side of the bearing, through the front. And you'll be able to see where it pushes all the old grease out. So doing it with a bearing packer allows you to see when all that old grease is pushed out and you got that nice new red grease coming out. That's when you know you're full and you've pushed out all the old grease and that bearing is completely packed with new grease. So we'll show you that. We got some old black grease in there right now. Just put the bearing in there, put that down, and then we just push. And you'll see that grease coming out. And there we go. You reach in there and pull this bad boy out, and you're going to see, you can see that now all that old grease is out. We got that nice new red grease coming up through there, so that bearing's completely packed. So we'll take all this extra, kind of wipe it off a little bit, wipe this grease out of that old bearing race inside there. I mean, you don't have to clean all that grease out of there. You just want to kind of make sure that you wipe that grease off of the old, wipe that grease off of your bearing race so that you can look and make sure there's no scoring or that the race isn't pitted. Alright, that looks good. So we're going to take our freshly packed wheel bearing, we're going to drop it right down inside there, just like that. And we're going to take our new seal. Now these seals are a double lip seal, meaning there's a lip on the outside, there's also a lip on the inside, and that's just to give you that extra layer of protection to keep grease from coming out, because if grease leaks past this seal, it's going to get all over your brakes, and you're going to have all kind of problems if you get grease that leaks out of here past the seal into your brakes. That's a bad thing. We don't want that. So so you can see how this seal is, like, this side is inset a little bit. It doesn't come out flush with the edge, and there's a little gap around it. That's going to be the side that goes against your bearing. The side that comes out all the way flush is the side that's going to be up against your your spindle this way. So it's going to go in like that with the gap side and the bigger seal down. That's your inner seal, and this is the outer seal. So we're just going to set that down in place. We're going to take our hammer and just gently work that around, tap it in. Again, they make seal drivers, seal tools, so that it pushes that seal in nice and flat without damaging it, but as long as you're careful and don't get too crazy with the hammer, you can tap it in on your own. And then you just want to just tap that seal down until it's flush. So when that seal gets flush, you're good to go. You're in there. Alright, that's it. That's the rear seal. It's done. So now we're going to spray this drum down. I'm going to put the drum back on. I'm going to adjust our brakes out just a little bit. Then we'll pack the front bearing, put it in, put it all back together, and that's it. We'll be done. So as you can see, it's not hard. It's really messy. But if you're prepared for that, and you have, I've got a garbage bag over here. I'm throwing all my greasy towels in. I got a big roll of shop towels that I've got just for this purpose. So I'm using these things to wipe down everything. Use them liberally. They're about $4 for a roll of shop towels. So that's, and if you prepare in advance, you could probably find them cheaper than that on Amazon or something. But wipe everything down. Try to keep grease out of your drum, off your brakes. We're just going to spray down the inside of the drum. So this drum was pretty free when I took it off. So I'm going to go ahead and put a couple turns on our star adjuster, which is located on the bottom. So you can try to do it by hand. If it won't do it by hand, you can use a little flat screwdriver and just adjust it out. So I don't want to put a lot on it. I just want to put a little bit. The shoes look pretty good. I did notice that the brakes really felt like they were maybe not working quite as effective as they had been. So I'm just going to go ahead and adjust these out a little bit. That way when I put the drum on, these brakes do self-adjust. They're supposed to self-adjust. So you do that by driving forward and hitting the brakes really hard, or backing up and hitting the brakes really hard. So, but if they get way out of adjustment, it takes a long time for them to get adjusted doing it that way. So if you just run that star adjuster out a little bit, it'll just help them self-adjust a little faster. All right, so we're going to slide our drum back on. You can hear I got just shoes are barely touching. That's all I really want. I don't really want them adjusted out tight, but their shoes are barely touching on that drum. That means they're going to be a lot closer than they were. I put about 2 turns on my little adjuster under there. So I'm gonna wipe off that extra grease. Get rid of that. And now we'll pack this front bearing. And again, this thing was really in need of grease. It's pretty dry, but luckily the bearing itself looks great. There's just hardly any grease in it. Same deal that you did with the big one. You're just gonna pull that out, drop it in with the tapered side down, and then you're just gonna push until you see that old grease come out. A little hard to see with the small bearings, but there you go. There you go. You can see we got full of new grease, which is what we're looking for. So Now we're just going to slide that right up inside the drum. There we go. Now we just have to stick our washer on there, put the nut on, tighten it down, loosen it up a little bit, and put our retainer on. So it's got a flat spot on it, can only go on one way. Put that on, take our nut, spin the nut on. And again, Dexter recommends 50 foot-pounds of torque, and then backing the nut off towards hand tight, towards loose, and then hand tighten it down and put your retainer on. Like I said in the beginning, don't have a torque wrench, so here's what we're going to do. Tighten that nut down. Get it nice and tight, where when you're spinning this drum, I can feel quite a bit of resistance. And that's got to be at least 50 foot-pounds of torque. And then we're going to back it off towards hand tight. And then they recommend you just tighten it back up. I'll tighten it back up by hand, and then I'm just going to put not even any pressure, just to take the slack out of it. So you can see it's still really loose. I'm just tightening that, not even tightening it, just to take the slack out of it. Almost no pressure on there. And there we go. So now, put our retainer back on, which also has a flat spot, so it can only go on one way. And if your retainer doesn't match up with your nut, you might have to adjust it a little bit, but you see I've got my flat spot there. I've got all the teeth going around, and we're going to click it in place. And now that nut cannot back off as long as that retainer's on there. And that's it. You know, like I said, time consuming a little bit, but you know, it's going to save you a tremendous amount of money versus paying somebody to come out and do that. It's, you know, it's not a super difficult job at all, especially if you have some of the right tools. So once you do that, you just throw your center cap back on, tap it on with a hammer. Center cap's on, and there you go. You know, that's it. I'm going to grease these. So take my rag. There is a grease fitting on your axle hanger here, on both of the spring hanger, and as well as the spring bolt. So there's grease fittings on the back side of both of these. Grease fitting on this bolt, and that's like that all the way around. So wipe that old grease off of the fitting. You know, and again, I mean, I picked up this grease gun. It was like 20 bucks at Harbor Freight. I had a cheaper one, but it didn't last, it didn't hold up. So I sprung for one that was a little more heavy duty. Had the solid tube versus the flexible hose. The flexible hose went on, but then it's hard to hold that up there on that grease fitting tight enough to work the handle. So I went with this one, and it seems to be working good so far. There we go. Pumps in there. Now I'm going to get these. So you still got to slide under here to get to those. I was hoping I wouldn't have to, but it's a lot easier to come in this way than trying to squeeze through So if you notice that when you raise or lower your trailer, hooking it up or leveling it, if you hear a lot of creaking coming from down here around the spring and axle area, it's because those bolts all need greased. I didn't realize those bolts had grease fittings on them because there was so much grime covering up you couldn't really see them. But I noticed when I would raise and lower the trailer, we were backing in, going around corners, and the trailer had to articulate it all. Man, this thing would like creak and pop, making all kind of noise, and it was because all those bolts were really in need of being greased. See a lot of people that have issues with spring hangers breaking, with bolts breaking. I think a lot of that's due to the fact that I don't think a lot of people realize that you can grease these springs, and they definitely need to be greased. So I don't know if that's why some people have issues with springs and hangers breaking, but it definitely is designed to be greased. So, you know, get in there and grease those things. I usually try to grease them whenever I do the bearings. I try to do all of it every 3 months, but in reality, sometimes it goes a little longer than that. You know, that's all there is to it. Put this tire back on, drop the jack, go to the other side, and we're going to do the same thing on the other 2 tires over there. So, you know, I hope you guys found something in here that'd be helpful. If you thought about doing your own bearings and you're just not sure if you can handle the job, as you can see, it's not hard. The bottle jack that I use is a 12-ton bottle jack, so you can see it's very small, very compact. I like to use small and compact things so that they're obviously easy to store. It's not hard to find a place. I actually carry that in the truck, just in case we were to have a flat on the truck or the trailer. I'll always have it with me. It's small, it fits up under the truck, it fits up under the trailer. You can see I've used some of my leveling pads to kind of raise it up. If there's something you guys have a question on, if you're wanting to tackle this job and there's a question you have that I didn't answer, I didn't address while doing this video, make sure to drop it in the comments. We try to keep up with our comments. We try to respond pretty quick if somebody has a question about anything. So I guess that's it for now. Try to get this knocked out before it gets to be 100 degrees out here today. Appreciate you guys watching. We'll catch you guys down the road.